Hey guys, I'm Ethan, co-host of the Shieldwall podcast. First off, thank you guys so much for listening. I wanted to ask all of you who enjoy our content to subscribe and comment wherever you listen. Follow us on social media. We're on all major platforms. If you have any episode suggestions or questions, definitely shoot us an email at shieldwallministries@gmail.com.
Welcome to the Shieldwall podcast, where tempered men are formed.
Sounds good.
Good. All right, we're back with another episode of the Shieldwall podcast. My name is Cody, and I have a special guest who, if you're a follower of this podcast and if you come to the Bible study, you'll be extremely excited to know that we have somebody who actually owns and operates a Chick-fil-a. We use in the Shieldwall Bible study a little bit of a tagline when talking about the Chick-fil-A. We call it the Lord's Chicken House. And I want to introduce you to him right now. His name is Scott Payne.
It's good to be here.
It is good to have you on this morning. We are actually at your establishment in Purcellville. We got here at 7 a.m. It's 7:48. We had a little technical difficulty on my end. Had to go back and get a microphone. But glad to have you on.
It's good to be here.
So you provided me with a delicious breakfast sandwich, tater tots, and a coffee this morning. So I appreciate that. Thank you for doing that.
My pleasure.
Anyone who knows me knows that I love Chick-fil-A, and you know, this is a place where I've spent a lot of my time in this particular one in Purcellville. But I've spent some time in some Chick-fil-A's all over this country. And I just appreciate the Chick-fil-A model. I appreciate everything that you guys have to offer. It's really nice knowing you personally and your faith in Christ and how that reflects over into your business model. You can't say that for every single person who owns a Chick-fil-A or every single person who owns any establishment. But to know you and to have been greeted by you the first time we came in here as the Bible study has always been our pleasure. So thank you for that.
Right on.
So to start off, can you just maybe introduce yourself briefly about where you came from, who you are, and what are you doing here?
My name's Scott Payne. I'm a Chick-fil-A operator, have been for a little over 3 years. I'm Kelly's husband. I'm a father to Andrew and Kevin and Sam and Kate. I spent most of my life in the Marine Corps. My dad was in the Marine Corps for 30 years. When I was a young man, I didn't want to do anything but that. It was inspirational as a young kid to watch my dad do what he did. And so when time came to go to college, I went to a service academy and I did what he did. He told me the day I got commissioned in 1992, he leaned up to me and whispered in my ear, he said, "Promise me that you'll stay only as long as it's fun." And I thought that was great advice. And it was fun for 23 years on and off, but more on than off. When we knew it wasn't going to be fun anymore, we made a plan. Kelly and I had decided that we would transition to commercial aviation. I flew KC-130 tanker transports in the Marine Corps. It's about the same size as a 737. Mm-hmm. And I figured that's what we would do. Because that's what every Marine pilot does when he retires. Mm-hmm. And Cody, what you got to understand is I love flying airplanes. Yeah. I mean, I love it. It's like putting on my favorite pair of jeans and just hanging out. You do it that long and you have the privilege of doing it without getting hurt. It's really cool. But I was in my last assignment, and I got a phone call from a friend of mine, and he and I both flew together, and we'd worked at the Pentagon together, and it was it was like Tuesday afternoon, out of the blue conversation with a close friend, and his name's Jeff Pellegrino. We call him JP, and
you still in contact with him?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'll make sure he gets he downloads the podcast, right?
Nice.
But JP said something like, "Hey, Scott, it's called Chick-fil-A, man. That's what you're supposed to do." And I'm like, JP, we're all going to the airlines, man. I'm going to Southwest. I love the culture there. Got a lot of friends there. I can't think of anything I'd rather do than fly a 737 for Southwest Airlines. And he said, no, dude, I just talked to a franchise recruiter at a Service Academy career convention. He went to the Naval Academy. I went to West Point. Mm-hmm. And from time to time, folks from industry will approach that group of folks and say, hey, this is an opportunity we think is a good mix. And he said, I don't think it's for me, but it's got your name written all over it. Wow. And we were living in Pensacola, Florida at the time. We lived there on and off our entire career. My Chick-fil-A was 9 Mile Road, operator Robert Barnes. And the only thing I knew about Chick-fil-A was that's where we went Wednesday night after church with all the kids, and we pushed all the tables together, and we'd roll in there about 9:30, and now I realize that what he was really doing was an extension of what we had done just down the street. Mm-hmm. And we'd hang out until closing time, until they turned off the menu board lights, and then we'd head out, and that's all I knew about Chick-fil-A. And I'm like, JP, chicken restaurant? Seriously?
Chicken restaurant?
He goes, no, check it out. And so I did. I talked to that franchise recruiter who was an operator. He was a West Point class of 76 guy who owned a restaurant for a long time in Cary, North Carolina, Rick Holcomb. Rick's still in business, still keeps tabs on me.
Nice.
And Rick had an interesting experience. He spent about half his 30 years in the Army on active duty, and then about halfway through, he transitioned out and went in the reserves and did that part-time while he was a Chick-fil-A operator. And so he knew my story. He knew my background, and he was pretty blunt, right? He's like, tell me your story, Payne. And we talked about a lot of things we'll talk about here, and he got to the end of that conversation. He goes, you got to look into it. I think you can make that work. And I realized that I had no idea what I was getting into, and that more people, the further I got along in my exploration of Chick-fil-A, the more that people would try to talk me out of it.
Oh, really?
But going back to the conversation with JP, I did what anybody will do. I went to the internet. I searched Chick-fil-A, and I pulled up the corporate website, and I went to that tab, about us or frequently asked questions. I'm not sure what it was, but I came on the corporate purpose. And Cody, the corporate purpose for Chick-fil-A?
Yeah, well, go ahead and tell us.
Truett wrote it in the early 1980s when Chick-fil-A was struggling a little bit, and they went away for the weekend and had a real prayerful time, and they thought they'd come out with a strategy to endure the early 1980s, but what they came out with was Chick-fil-A exists to glorify God by being a faithful steward of all that's entrusted to us, and to have a positive influence on all who come in contact with Chick-fil-A.
Amen.
And I had that moment, right, where I sat back in my chair and I said, I think this is all I want to do with the rest of my life.
Right there.
Yeah, right. I mean, right there. It was Tuesday afternoon, about 10 after 4, and I had a lot of other work to do, but like JP interrupted my life, and it was one of those things that had been a long time coming. I didn't come to Christ until I was 32. Mm-hmm. I mean, I attended church all my life, but I didn't surrender until I realized the bankruptcy of trying to do it on my own. And from that point forward, some things radically changed in in my personal life and in my professional life, and that kind of set the stage for that moment about 10 years later when I collided with the corporate purpose of Chick-fil-A, and I'm like, what I'm going to miss about the Marine Corps isn't so much flying airplanes as it is teaching and coaching and mentoring young people.
Right.
And I left the Marine Corps, or as I was approaching retirement, I did so with a lot of apprehension, right? I mean, Cody, I had a dream job, man. I flew airplanes in the Marine Corps.
Yeah, sounds awesome.
And I did it with, it's never what you do, it's who you do it with.
Sure, yes, absolutely.
But I did it with men and women of the highest character. Folks that would literally lay down their life for you. And I didn't want to be outside of that culture. It's not a perfect culture, but what you see is what you get, And then as I went forward from that conversation with JP and I started doing some digging, I mean, Cody, imagine the look on Kelly's face when I came home that day and I'm like, so, here's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking we should
total life change real quick.
We should, if the airlines don't work out, and I mean, mind you, I had applications in with the airlines. I was networking with the Georgia Business Aviation Association. We had planned to move from Pensacola to Atlanta. We were going to fly airplanes, and Kelly was going to go back to teaching school, and we were going to make it work, right? Mm-hmm. And when I started digging into it, I realized that this place, Cody, wasn't. It was a people business disguised as a chicken restaurant.
Yeah.
And that what we really do here is what Truett knew from the very beginning. And this is a business of hospitality. We could sell chicken sandwiches, cars, vacuum cleaners. I don't think it really matters. It's what we do.
Right.
And so digging into that was what really changed things. Early on, I mean, mind you, from the time that JP called until the time that I shook hands with Mr. Dunphy from Chick-fil-A, about 15 months. And so that it really was more of a courtship than it was, an interview process. But in that time, I went from mildly interested, like, hey, that's a chicken restaurant down the road, to I've got to do this. Yeah. Whatever it takes, I've got to do this. We retired from the Marine Corps shortly after we shook hands with Chick-fil-A. I joke, along the way, you'll pick up a few mentors that have all said the same thing. They're like, hey, Scott, tell me your story. And why would you want to be a Chick-fil-A operator? And then they spend, the majority of that conversation telling you why you shouldn't be a Chick-fil-A operator. Because Cody, it's hard work.
Imagine so.
And in the model that Truett built, when it says owner operator, the operative word is operator. The operative word is I expect you in the restaurant. The operable word is you can't fly for the airlines and own a Chick-fil-A restaurant. This is it. This is what you do. And you do that because leadership is presence. And that, that kind of harmonized with my philosophy. But as I was working through with my mentors, one of my mentors is a guy named William Bulware. He owns a couple restaurants down in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. And he's a Marine pilot as well. And he said, Scott, where do you want to go? And, my folks live in South Carolina, and I'm like, well, man, we'd like to go to South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, someplace in the Southeast, just be close to mom and dad or Kelly's parents. And he goes, man, you don't get it. He goes, Chick-fil-A is going to call one day, and they're going to say, Scott, what do you think about name the city? Mm-hmm. And your answer is my pleasure. And you don't really care. You don't care where you go, because because you just want to be part of the brand.
Right.
And wherever you go is where you're supposed to go. And I think that's biblical.
Yeah. Follow the call.
But so one day franchise selection called and they're like, "Hey Scott, what do you think about Purcellville, Virginia?" And I was like, "My pleasure. Where is it?" And,
you hadn't known anything about it prior to that?
no, I mean we lived in Prince William County when I was at the Pentagon.
Yeah, a little bit, but not Purcellville's probably not on your radar.
No, I mean I was like Loudoun County. The only thing I knew about Loudoun County was it was the first place in the D.C. area that closed schools.
Yeah, that's true. Hint of wind, hint of snow.
Snow, whatever. I get it now. I mean, I live off a dirt road, so I get it. But, so, I mean, when we shook hands, with Chick-fil-A, we didn't know anything about this town. I just knew that this was where God wanted me next, and so that's what we did. We got out of the Marine Corps, packed up the truck, and moved up here, and literally knew next to no one. Knew my realtor, knew John and Kristen Horniak, who we collided with, some folks that we'd met at an airport that lived out here, and opened a restaurant and started learning.
Yeah, and I remember when they were putting the foundation down, you could see the sign went up that said a Chick-fil-A was coming.
Yeah.
It was just like my wife and I were driving by because the next Chick-fil-A is 15 minutes away, but this is our home, and we were like, wow, the Lord is blessing us with a Chick-fil-A. And it's been true. I mean, there's so much blessing that comes to this. I have 3 little ones, and you have a playhouse that they'll go in. It's so funny. I've tried so many times to tell my little 4-year-old how to say Chick-fil-A, and she says it every single time. She says Chick-fil-A. Chick-fil-A. She has an extra Chick-fil-A. Whenever Sunday is coming up and we're driving past Chick-fil-A, she'll notice it, and she'll even say, "We can't go there today." I was like, "Why is that, Abby?" "Because they're closed." I was like, "Okay, why is that?" Because it's the Lord's Day. And so for her, being, our daughter, but we tell her, like, this place is closed today because this is everybody's going to church. We're trying to honor the Lord with rest. And so by extension, you're teaching our child what Sabbath looks like just by being in our town and us having to explain to her why her favorite chicken house is closed.
Yeah.
That's a huge blessing. So when you guys came in, this is not speaking ill to any other competition in the restaurant industry, but it was almost as if there was a sign from the Lord for us as a family. It's like, all right, we can stay here for a little bit longer. A Chick-fil-A came. And I say that kind of jokingly, but also it was interesting to know that the town was starting to build, and there's progress being made with some of the hiccups of, trying to get more businesses in this particular area. But that also led to where I was at 3.5 years ago with my Bible study, trying to find a spot for us to meet outside of church, not on a Sunday evening or not in Sunday school, and trying to bring young men to a place where they could, eat a good meal, but also feast off the Word. So when you guys opened up, you literally brought life to my little Bible study. It was meeting down the street at another coffee shop. And we were, if you can remember, some days we were packed out. We had lines and lines of chairs. We ran out of places that we could sit because men just came and wanted to, read the Word. And every man brought his Bible, and they bought a chicken sandwich. It was a beautiful blend of just seeing how an established restaurant with core ethics could just attract men that wanted to come and meet and have a Bible study. And people were strengthened by the Bible study that we were having. We still have that, but it's going to wane down because I've had kids and life has happened. But the idea that a Chick-fil-A or a restaurant could be a beacon to a community. And I don't mean to say that lightly either. There were people that they'd call me and they'd ask, "Hey, can we meet up?" "Sure, let's go to Chick-fil-A." Or somebody wanted to be discipled, or something happened where they, like just said, they just needed to meet up. Chick-fil-A opens up at 6 a.m. Let's go there. Or 7 a.m. Let's go there. And that component to your story is part of my story, how we collided. And it's been such a blessing to know that we can go here and we're welcomed. Or sometimes some of the guys come in and are like, "Should I buy something?" And I'm like, "Yeah, buy something. You're here. Go get something." Just sitting and being with people in a place we know that's honoring the Lord independently of us. it's a side story to what you're talking about, but it's just how when you made your decision to switch from the Marine Corps flying airplanes to say my pleasure to the corporate office that said Purcellville, Virginia. From that moment, there was a trajectory of events that you personally and your family have affected positively for the kingdom of God. And so for the men of Shieldwall, for myself, and even for this moment that we're having this podcast, thank you for saying my pleasure to that individual who called you up.
I'm honored.
So
we really are.
So knowing that you guys were going to do a life change, and you moved to Northern Virginia, you're in the process of your building, you got the framework coming up. What's going through your mind? You see the frame of your building coming up, and then you see the community around you almost, and this is an area, we'll put some pictures, where it wasn't fully as developed as it is today. Are you scared? Are you nervous?
I am scared to death.
How's that feel?
It feels really, really uncomfortable because, Cody, I didn't know what I didn't know.
Right.
I spent my entire life in federal service. My dad wasn't an entrepreneur. He didn't own a business. And Chick-fil-A said, we don't need that. We'll teach you what you need to know, or life's going to teach you what you need to know. But it was a little weird. The thing about the Marine Corps at the end was that there weren't a lot of surprises. There were hard days, but you kind of saw them coming, and you'd worked through 1,000 problems before, and it was just a problem to be solved. And then when we came to this, there were those months that the restaurant was going up before we opened. Early on, July, August, there's not a whole lot for a new operator to do. Come August, it gets really busy really fast, and you've got some inputs to make to the restaurant. You've got a staff to hire. You've got a staff to train. You've got every single system to establish, from how do we close the restaurant to where do you want the Diet Dr. Pepper on the drink tower, right?
Yeah.
I don't know where I want the Diet Dr. Pepper on the drink tower, right? Do you want caffeine-free Diet Coke or not? I think we do. But those were some awkward times, and I realized that the life that God had called me to was I realize that even today that He doesn't need me to know, the course necessarily. He just needs me to be obedient, and I can only imagine how the Israelites felt crossing the Jordan River, like not sure what we're supposed to do here, but I know we're here, and this is we're just going to do what we're told, and I'd be lying if I didn't tell you that I was a little fearful, but I knew what Mr. Cathy had always said. Truett said, you go into business for yourself, but not by yourself as a Chick-fil-A operator. And what I came to acknowledge very quickly was that the people that were around me, not just the folks from Chick-fil-A Incorporated in Atlanta, but the other Chick-fil-A operators around Loudoun County, very quickly became my family. Wow. It was late July of 2015 when I got a phone call out of the blue, and it came from Bill Diggs, and Bill owns a couple of restaurants in eastern Loudoun County. He owns George Washington Chick-fil-A and Dullestown Crossing, and he said, "My name's Bill Diggs. I want to invite you to our operator meeting here on Tuesday, and I think you're going to need me." And I was like, "That's interesting." I wasn't turning down any help, but I didn't. I'd never been in a place where someone just calls you out of the blue and says, "Hey, I'm here to help," and
you need me,
and you need me. You don't know what you don't know, and you need me. Bill's been practicing Chick-fil-A for over 20 years. He's a multi-unit operator. He's seen every single problem in one way, shape, or form that comes with this line of work. He's like a brother to me now. And when he said, "I think you're going to need me," he attached himself, he yoked himself to me, and has ever since. And in the darkest early days of our business, he was here. It doesn't hurt he lives off of Airmont Road, but
right. So he's literally here.
He's literally here. I joke with him all the time. I'm like, I am your Chick-fil-A,
That's so funny.
But
when you see him come in here,
what's that?
Does he come in here?
Most of the time he'll call me and say, "Hey, Scott, are you in the restaurant?"
Okay.
But sometimes he'll just call me and go, "I'm in your restaurant," and
between two operators, that's probably funny.
It is. I mean, but to be truthful, that relationship between operators is what keeps you here, because nobody else gets it. And when you say, "Hey, I'm short on thawed grilled nuggets. Can you spare 2 bags of thawed grilled nuggets?" You know that those are.
Does that actually happen?
Well, I mean, from time to time, you betcha. I mean, if you have an equipment problem, or you just misjudged catering. I've never been to prison, but I've heard folks say that thawed chicken can be like cigarettes in prison, because
that's so funny.
Because it takes about 24 to 30 hours to take chicken out of thaw. It comes to us flash frozen, and then we put it in thawing cabinets at about 35 degrees. And man, if you get behind, like you misjudge the catering demand. I mean, we've got a lot of extra chicken thawed right now because we expect to do a lot of trays today in advance of the big game tomorrow, right?
Right.
So, but that 4 years in. That first year, you don't know that, and you just get spanked by reality. Hey, you don't know what you don't know, Payne. Let me teach you a lesson. But that that relationship has been magnificent, and it's amazing what happens. But that still doesn't take all of the anxiety, and because you got 1,000 decisions you got to make, and you're comfortable making decisions. You just don't. You're not comfortable with the decisions you got to make. So, and I don't think that ever goes away for a small business owner. I think you get comfortable with discomfort, and it forces you. I know that it's forced me to lean on the Lord straight up.
Yeah.
You can't. What else are you gonna do? You gonna try to do it on your own? You can try to muscle your way through, but you'll fail. Big picture. God needed to break me, and He needed all of me, and He needed to communicate to me with my entire livelihood that I depend on Him for everything.
That's a good point. It's absolutely, regardless of whether or not you are an operator of Chick-fil-A, or you're a stay-at-home mom, or you work for the government, or whoever you are, if you claim to have Christ as your Lord and Savior, you acknowledge His lordship over you. Question now about leadership. How you implement biblical qualities or biblical distinctions in your philosophy of being an operator in leadership. So I've seen some things now through this conversation where Chick-fil-A seems to have this culture of appreciation that what you are working for and what you're working towards is not just personal wealth. It's the actual betterment of those around you, your community, your family. I mean, yet other operators basically say, you need me. Sounds very Pauline, from the Bible, coming to you and saying, I'm the older brother, you're the younger brother.
Yeah.
Let me take you under my wings. You need me. So you are now doing this for the last three and a half, almost 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
And what are some things, maybe your personal life, where you I'll edit that out. In your personal life, where you're maintaining your Christian ethic, you're maintaining your understanding of who you are in Christ, and your devotional time with the Lord, how that's encouraging you, and what do you take away from that and bring as a operator, as an owner of a facility where you're seeing young lives come in the door, and this might be their first job, or this might be a job where you're considering, hey, this isn't working out. But your ultimate goal is to not just bring out the negative in them, but to bring out the positive and build them up and mentor them and be a leader and show and lead by example. How are you able to do that to be a good leader? Because there's a saying that says there's no bad teams, there's only bad leaders. I believe that to an extent. You have some in there where you're like, nope, that's a person who's not really wanting to be a part of the team. They're needing some personal growth. They're actually affecting the rest of us negatively. As a leader, maybe some tips or pointers or some areas where leadership is important if you're going to be an operator.
Any success that we've enjoyed here, I will give credit to the Lord. I personally, I don't think I've got the team that I deserve. I think they're a lot better than the leader I am.
Hope they're listening.
Chick-fil-A asked me a very similar question in our courtship, and they said, "Scott, what's your leadership philosophy?" And there's a zillion books on leadership, right? It just clobbers the business section of any bookstore. And I said, "Well, guys, I'd love to give you some sophisticated answer, but in my experience in the Marine Corps, leadership is simply presence. I may not be the most talented guy on the planet, but I'll be there. I'll show up every day. To use a football analogy, I will button my chin strap and put my helmet on and work through the problem. We joke sometimes on our leadership team that, if you've ever seen the Lego movie, there's a song in the Lego movie, Everything is Awesome. And in that movie, the little Lego people have cupped hands. And I said, if we all walked around with cupped hands and sang Everything is Awesome, we wouldn't have any need for leaders, right? Because everybody'd show up on time and they'd be in the right uniform and they would deliver, every aspect of the Chick-fil-A service model, and my guests would be pleased 100% of the time. But the real reason that we have leaders is to solve problems,
right?
And I do the best I can to solve problems. And when the hard ones come, I tend to stop and listen. And on the hardest days, if I've got to make a hard decision on an employee, if I got to make a termination decision, I always like to sleep on it, and that's secular for I need to go pray about it, because I think when somebody comes into our restaurant, they don't, and they join the team, they haven't come to fail.
Right.
I believe that everybody wakes up in the morning trying to do the right thing, and at some point in the day, we all go off track, right? And it's not so much that we went off track; it's how we get back on track. And as a leader, I think that's one of the biggest roles I play is be around, solve the problem, get us back on track. And I've just God's brought me a collection of people that I certainly don't deserve, that solve problems and have a heart for the business and have a heart for our guests, that I could never teach, train, coach, or mentor. They just come. And when we're in a hurt box for team members, God provides. When I think about leadership, I think it's about showing up.
I like how you said that, the presence. It comes down to it. Ultimately, you're going to be the one that's making the hard decisions and deciding for people where their job will go and what they're going to execute that day. you're going to take the responsibility ultimately if the vision fails. Being there, being present. May not be in all areas your expertise on finance or giving advice or however it would be, but you're supposed to be there. You're the leader. You're the head of this, and you're going to bear the responsibility if something goes wrong, or even when you have a moment where you're rejoicing with your team.
Mm-hmm.
They know now the trust has been built to follow you through example. There's just a principle of respect for the person who's the leader in the group, but then you start to see them and you're with them, kind of like with a good shepherd. He's with his sheep. It starts to know and understand his moves and trust him because of where it leads him.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a huge thing. Being somebody who's seen you in your own store is that you're here. You're very quick. You can see you're moving around. You're doing the thing. You're working. You're not just there, task mastering. Overtop your people, lording them. Seeing your people distressed. No, you see people. You got a bag of food. You're running outside. And somebody needs their food. And you're just doing the job, and your people see that. And I think I think when you're not here, and when other people like myself, we see your team efficiently running. There's reflection there, big time, from not only what they've seen in you, but what they probably expected themselves now. Because here's the guy who's running the show, and he's not doing anything less than his best. And one word that comes to mind when I think of Chick-fil-A is excellence. It's just excellence. And that's not an overstatement at all. You have, I don't know if it's by design, I don't know the whole model, you maybe tell me about this, but you have individuals who will come out periodically to the tables and just ask, do you want anything? Can I get your refill? And they're not cleaning the tabletops. They're just out here just to look around and make sure that, everybody's being served, or those that have been served or being reserved. I can't imagine sitting here with your daughters and somebody spills something and you ran out of napkins and you're like, if I get up, they'll get up. And they're a mess. But you have your two ladies that generally do that when we're here. And they'll come over and just, oh, no, you go right ahead. Go to the restroom. And, gives you extra napkins. Yeah. Certain aspects of biblical hospitality that you've built into this restaurant. And again, you said earlier, it's not just a business. You said it best.
It's a people business disguised as a chicken restaurant.
And change the product. Your philosophy would be the same. Selling cars, or as somebody who's a customer, I appreciate that you sell this chicken. This is good chicken.
It is.
And the question I have to ask you, is it chicken nuggets or chicken strips? Man. Which one do you prefer?
Cody, that's a tough question. I mean, I like them both. It depends on the day.
Yeah. You said earlier there's a difference in the flavor.
There's a little bit different flavor profile in a strip than a nugget. The reality is I taste everything every week. From a quality and guest experience standpoint, I think you got to know. I'll never tell you what I like the most. I like it all.
Right.
But what I love about nuggets is they're fast. I just take a fork and you just work it out. Or you can just use your fingers, but
boom, boom, boom. Yep.
But like if you have a little bit more time and you want to, knife and fork, then you put it on a strip. I love strips on a salad. I think it kind of depends on the day. I can't make a decision on that. What's your favorite?
I gotta go with strips. I don't know, for whatever reason. I think I'm getting the quantity effect on that one. I'm getting more for my buck.
You think so?
I don't know. But I know that when I'm eating it, it tastes, I don't know, like the chicken sandwich. Because it's full. It's a strip. It's breast. It's cut 3 different ways. The nuggets, sometimes for me, when I reheat the nuggets, if I go back home, the quality of taste changes a little bit. With the strip, though, it still remains the way that it originally was.
That's interesting. I've never reheated strips. But I can see that.
And you got the 3 selections. You got the grilled, the original, and then you got the spicy, and then you've got the club. You have anything that's on the mystery menu that you can tell us about that we might be able to ask?
So like secret menu?
Do you have any secret menus here at Purcellville? I can hashtag and tell people about, run in and get.
I'll tell you the long answer. My friend William Boyer from Tuscaloosa, Alabama, was up here visiting Washington D.C. one weekend, and he called me out of the blue. And he's like, "Hey, Scott, would love to come work in your restaurant today. You got time? And I'm like, man, I always get time for free labor, right? And especially from a mentor. We got to the end of the day, and he worked all day with me, and we went out to dinner that night, and he's like, where are we? And I was like, what do you mean, where are we? I said, we're in Loudoun County, Virginia, brother. He goes, your product mix is so different than mine. He goes, it seems like everyone has a secret menu. Like everyone has a specific way they want their sandwich built. And I said, well, wasn't that Chick-fil-A? He goes, no. He goes, in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, it's chicken and fries, man. He goes, it's a number one Chick-fil-A chicken sandwich and medium fries and a Coke, and we do that a lot. He goes, you got a spicy deluxe, no tomato. You got